Hello and welcome to GuyLogicGaming. My name is Temco, and this beautiful little painting is Pyre. Developed by SuperGaintGames, the same people that brought us the gems by the names of Bastion and Transistor, Pyre is their new title with the trusted strength of a developer team that apparently has no weakness, as they take quite the departure from their previous titles in this one. Pyre is a mix between a visual novel, a choose-your-own-adventure book, and a basketball game. I know you did not mishear that. Pyre takes amazing visuals, art, and sound design that we are well used to from SuperGaintGames and wraps it up in the tactical depth of its combat and never lets go from start to finish. Your goal is to complete the rites, which are a set of challenges with a motley crew of various creatures, and you do so by exploring and experiencing this beautiful world. Before we explore the title any further, there are a few notes to make on the technical side of things as we head over in the options menu. First, you'll notice that there is no visual options to speak of, and for this as any 2D title, that is absolutely fine. While on some occasions in 2D games I'd lament the lack of shadows or other possible visual post-processing features, in Pyre I will do no such thing. As you can already see, the game is a visual wonderland, and every single scene, animation, character, visual, full body facial expression is a joy to behold. This means that this is one of the few games where I actually see no way to properly add things like colorblind mode without extensively negatively impacting the actual game experience, and as such, it gets an unusual pass from me in that regard. Where I also take a bit of enjoyment is the option to select your gender as the protagonist, which is how characters will address you as. You don't have a body or a character really in the game, but the fact that such a small option, such a small little level of attention to detail, I truly enjoy finding in a game like this, that while not having any actual gameplay effect, gives more personality and direct experience to you, the player. Very good. Further options are mostly related to audio, and while there is no master volume slider, the 3 separate sliders are very adequate in conveying the range of audio options. Moving on to controls, we do touch upon my first minor gripe, and that is that the default binding for the mouse preset is not that great, and I strongly suggest switching to the WASD preset and looking to change a few keys to better suit gameplay, such as moving the salute action, the Q button away from the T, which is much easier to manage in terms of gameplay as a PC gamer. If you're playing on a controller, obviously different rules apply, but we're a PC channel and we generally focus on keyboard and mouse, and there are a couple of annoyances with the default bindings there. All the keys are rebindable, so that is definitely a plus, and it does make up for the relative weakness of the defaults that cause some annoyance until you figure out what they do for you. Which also brings us to the last part, if we go ahead and ignore the save slot tab, which we shall do, to display settings. With the game supporting most common resolutions, as well as a windowed and borderless windowed mode, nothing strange or unusual in that regard, right? Well, the game doesn't really support ultra-wide resolutions. Reports indicate that while it doesn't break the game, the well-known black bars on the sides, when the game doesn't support that ultra-wide resolution, are readily apparent. And in this particular instance, I don't really mind. The game's graphical style and the way the graphics are made and designed and rendered even on screen does really restrict them from providing a large amount of scaling in these weird and awkward resolutions, so they get a bit of a pass on that one. That said, from a technical perspective, the game runs exceedingly well. It's smooth 60 plus FPS at any given time, and even when switching scenes or triggering events, there isn't a stutter to be detected. Obviously, this isn't a visual demanding game most of the time, but even so, a smooth experience, especially in the combat areas, is always important, and the game delivers here with absolute perfection. That all said, how can the game be both a visual novel, a choose-your-own-adventure book, as well as a basketball game? And that answer lies in both the strength of the title, as well as the main reason you might not like it. So let's get started with the game's most divisive feature, and that is quite literally the strong divide between visual novel-style adventure and narrative, as well as the fast-paced tactical combat experience that the game switches between as you go through the single-player campaign. Where one moment you're talking to an overgrown mustache-wearing dog, and the next you're tabbing between 3 characters in a magical powered space jam of impressive tactical depth, trying to score those wonderful points. And while separately, these two components, which I'll dive further into in a moment, are absolutely without reproach, the jumping between the relaxed and slow-paced visual and dialogue-based gameplay and the tactical fast-paced combat is quite literally a a jarring experience. Depending on how enchanted you are with the strengths of the game in both regards, your mileage may vary as to how far this might bother you. For me personally, the strength of the game in general overcomes any possible annoyance at this duality. In fact, it gives the game a certain charm which I truly enjoy, but you obviously might have a different opinion. So to the strengths we go, and let's start at the visuals, because this game is a painting come to life. Every hue of color and every scene, this game has it all down to a T. Every scene is a glowing saga of art that breaks conventional molds but keeps being recognizable. Slime-filled pits with acid that glow and feel enchanting rather than drab and annoying and foreboding. Veritable rivers of lava glow across the screen as they create a tidal wave of heat and make you quite literally wonder how your little rickety wagon could ever make its way through, and it does all this while keeping the sheer wonder and magic in each scene strong time and again. But the world alone could not carry this title if it wasn't for excellent character design, which, while an extension of the visuals, do definitely stand on their own. Each character is an embodiment of their personality made visual, and while that might sound very much like they fit the usual tropes, the very strength of the title lies in making those tropes feel lovable, enjoyable, and recognizable. There is a minor remark to be made in relation to the lack of animations, including idle animations or transitions between facial expressions. The charm of this visual novel-esque experience does hold true, and with the excellent sound design accompanying the title, it's not a miss that you'll notice too much most of the time. The visual style though is very different in the combat mode, and while I'd still call it amazing, it does take much more of a stylistic and modern feel compared to the visual novel experience. Keeping its core visuals consistent across both of these experiences is very impressive and does deserve all the praise it's getting, as animations also take off to extraordinary levels of detail and quality in this second mode, where they are not necessary in the first visual novel mode. And this experience, which we'll go into detail later, creates this fast, responsive combat mode while still keeping a very smooth gameplay experience into these combat encounters for rights. Now, moving on from pure visuals, we do need to discuss audio, because I don't think I've ever felt more in love with a game's audio design than when I played Transistor by these very same developers. Many games use audio really well, from small indies to amazing AAA releases. We need not look beyond Doom's soundtrack for some truly excellent audio design choices, enhancing the gameplay you are experiencing and putting you further in that excellent killing frenzy that Doom loves. Here though, the audio design takes a very different note. It's more of a leading edge, where many games use it to support an existing activity. The visual novel parts of this game have limited animations. The music and sound effects are the ones setting the stage, and each bang, clang, whimper, and pang of sound you notice takes the forefront along with the text you're reading, and then being followed by the visual design of the characters and animations as they are. And this continues into the background audio for each scene and setting, with light and tilting music edging in to set the tone for the activity at hand, making it clear to you what the scene needs to convey rather than the other way around, where the scene is merely enhanced by the audio undertones. Now, this might feel very heavy-handed on occasion, but I can't find myself caring too much on that regard, because the audio and overall music is very good and does not detract at all from the overall experience. The last part of audio though is voiceovers and voice acting, and here I do have an issue, not with the voice acting quality itself, which, as much of this game, is fantastic, but I don't like the very limited use of voice acting in certain parts of the game, such as the combat mode and announcers, but the use of a very weak and badly set together Fox language in the visual novel parts. I feel that the game takes the visual novel notion quite a bit further than the game itself might benefit from in other segments, and as a choose your own adventure title as well as an interesting tactics game, it might want to tone that down. Sadly, the Fox language itself doesn't really fit when you have to move between those excellent transitions between the Fox language, and you filter that out as background noise as you're reading a new piece of text or dialogue that isn't voiced, and the moment you might want to switch off, not paying attention to the dialogue when the announcer in the combat mode suddenly shouts out what is going on. It's not the end of the world, especially once you get used to when these transitions take place, but it is nonetheless a less than perfect experience, and I can only imagine the decision was weighed with nothing more in mind than development time and the cost required for voice acting such a diverse cast, in a way to reduce the overhead for the development cycle. Though fairly, I'd have preferred a full Faux language in the game with just subtitles and text, as opposed to this middle-of-the-road solution. What is available in terms of voice acting is great, but sadly, it not always being available makes the highlighted areas where it isn't that much more apparent in a negative manner. So what is this choose your own adventure part then all about? Because visuals and audio alone do not make a game, and that part can thankfully be summed up quite easily, as the biggest part of this feature isn't a very complex mechanic, but it does allow you to create a very cool divergent story. On occasion during gameplay, you'll get choices in dialogue, progression activities, as well as choices in which path you'll take to your destination with your wagon. Each choice has a direct effect in two categories. It either buffs or debuffs the stats of a party or particular character for an upcoming rite challenge, or it lets you find an object that you can sell to a traveling merchant in trade for gold, which then again you can use to buy items from him to enhance your characters. And while these effects might sound minor, they have a secondary effect that impacts the underlying story quite a bit harder. While a single choice to pick one character's preferred path over another in this divergent path might not sound big, it can lead and translate to other choices becoming unavailable down the line, or that character simply not providing dialogue or divergences later in the story. Every choice in this game, while not often apparently heavy on the outset, does affect the game down the line in lesser and greater effect. Sadly, part of the game mostly lets you choose only in spirit, making it feel like a charade even when it's clearly not. Picking the next place to go for a rite isn't picking, developers, when I only have one single damn choice. Now don't get me wrong, it's a beautiful and well animated choice, but it's still only one option. Taking that a step on, there are certain segments where you enter a pseudo minigame where your performance affects the outcome in the same manner as the dialogue options do, and that is a truly lovely piece of non-linear game design. You can die and the story will go on pretending it's okay, but you can be sure that there's going to be consequences for your activities later down the line. Whether these are positive or negative is something you'll have to find out depending on the pathways you've taken. Which does bring us nicely to the combat interaction in the game. Primarily, combat is a bit of a misnomer in my eyes, but as I don't have a better word for it other than calling it this weird way of playing basketball with a flaming pit, combat will have to do. This mechanic is what is referred to as the rites, a mythical challenge between two groups to see who will proceed to win the favor of the gods. Each rite you encounter uses the same basic idea in terms of mechanics, but does change it up in terms of the playing field to keep things somewhat relevant to the segment of the story you find yourself in. Part visual, part mechanical. The goal is fairly simple. Get the big glowing orb that spawns in the middle into the enemy's fire until their fire loses all of its hit points. The damage will vary depending on which character you use or if you decide to throw it at the fire from a distance. The trick here is twofold. First, only one character can move at any time, and secondly, the character holding the orb, if touched by these auras each character has around him, dies and has to respawn, which takes a couple of seconds depending on the character. This already makes it a little bit trickier, but the game has a couple more mechanics up its sleeve to create a much deeper tactical experience than you might ever expect. To create further depth in the system, each character has their own unique skill set with their own special abilities and moves. While on the surface, they all seem to fall under the same umbrella of dashing, jumping, and shooting their aura at their opponents. Under the surface, there are various nuances of the system that create a lot of depth. The smaller dog character can perform a double jump, for example, allowing him a very flexible movement pattern in the air or even across obstacles, while the big giant character has the ability to stomp down in a jump and knock back every other creature several steps. This way, each character has their own unique twist that not only fits well with the character design, but allows for deeper tactical play in a well-oiled mix of mechanics and design. As I said, each character can only move when the other is standing still, and if the character has the orb, that is the character that is moving. More than that, when a character is standing still, orb or not, they can be attacked and banished, which requires them, based on a stat they have, to respawn after a few seconds. This obviously means that you'll probably be jumping between the active character, trying to make sure that you banish your opponent, and making sure to keep your lads alive while maintaining control of the orb. All in all, this in itself sounds daunting as is, but with the controls being mostly smooth and simple, it's a fairly easy concept to grasp, while keeping the technical skill ceiling quite a bit higher than it looks at first glance. A third layer comes into play when you add the extra various bits, such as auras that overlap between two characters, amplifying them both, covering a much greater area. And lastly, the character that has the orb does not have an aura and gets banished upon touching any opponent. Add a quick and simple stamina system for fancy double jumps and long dashes and whatnot, Mix that in with a unique area modifiers, and you've got everything set to play some amazing basketball. That obeys most of the rules of the game of basketball in the same way Space Jam ever did, and about as much enjoyable moments as you might expect in something similar, where parts amazement, annoyance, and pleasure come together when you get a move done, get a move pulled on you, and when you score one of those wonderful points with a jump you never thought you could make. This combat is mostly the bread and butter of the game when combined with the choose your own adventure style, and developers have done an outstanding job in making their core gameplay loop to be very fun and enjoyable. Somehow they've made what many others game would have as a throwaway gimmick into a rich and deep tactical competitive match, and that, obviously, is damn amazing. That said, the next question is how you can play the arena mode against other players, and here I have my final annoyance with the title. The multiplayer variant of the rights is local only, meaning there's no online play available for those of us that wish to go ahead and measure up against other players in a competitive environment. This for me is the biggest gripe with the game I have. While the story and gameplay in single player is phenomenal, as I said time and again in this review, the one part that will make me keep coming back to this title after experiencing the story once or twice is exactly this arena combat basketball-esque right system, but only when I can play with friends who are further away from me than being crammed behind my desk to get a match going on. This makes it a little bit sad as it removes a massive part of the appeal and longevity I feel for this title. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't suddenly a game you should not buy, because from start to finish, all my gripes are minor and all my issues are minimal outside of the local-only multiplayer. This is a phenomenal title and worth several playthroughs to experience and enjoy from all angles and parts on the single player alone. But it's not perfect, and the jarring duality between the two big segments and the lack of online multiplayer do bring it down a few notches, from orgasm-inducing to merely fantastic. So by all means, go play Pyre, you will not regret it. There's a link to check out the game in the description below, and I do strongly suggest you check that game out. So thank you for watching. If you like this video, do hit that like button, and if you want to see more content like this on the channel, just press that subscribe button down below. If you want to support GuyLogicGaming as we bring you continued ad-free content, do consider checking out our Patreon, which you can find in the description down below. So I wish you a good day, and until next time, right here on GuyLogicGaming.